A little note. Yeah, which, as you know, means that everything you say could be now used against you in a court of justice.
Very good.
Suspect you're not intimidated by that. So Dan, lovely to see you, and congratulations on your latest book, Misbelief, which I really enjoy reading. Let me start with the obvious question, which is, why did you write this?
So I didn't plan on writing this book, but COVID was a real highlight, I think, for me from my professional life. In the sense that there was this crazy thing going around, people were trying to figure out what to do, and I got requests from tons of people and tons of governments. I was sitting with my computer and 2 phones and just trying to help people think about what to do with the increase in domestic violence, what to do with distance education, what to do with paying people on furlough, work from home, lots of questions. And all of a sudden, a few months into it, I get an email that says, Dan, what's wrong with you? How have you changed so much? From somebody I once knew. So I write back, I said, how have I changed? And I think of this as very humorful. And I get an email back with lots of links. And I'll just describe one of them. But that link shows pictures of me in hospital from my early days in the burn department. It described how badly I was burned, 70% of my body, 3 years in hospital, all true. And then it goes on to describe how that made me hate healthy people, which is not true, and how it got me to join the cabal, Bill Gates, the Illuminati, trying to kill as many healthy people as possible. All of it not true, in case you know me a little bit. And that got me onto 2 separate journeys. The first journey was a journey to try and explain myself to the group of people who thought this way. I spent about a month trying to discuss, argue, meeting some people, inviting some of them to meet personally, and I failed. I failed miserably defending myself. And then after a month of failure, which you could say that as a social scientist I should have predicted, after a month of failure, I started saying, I just need to study this thing. I need to understand what is going on. And the book is basically my journey over the next 2 years of trying to understand the psychology of misbelief. And so I feel I was propelled to it. I was chosen to do this. But I will tell you, and you probably feel the same, that at the end of this book, I think it's a bigger problem than when I started. I think it's bigger and more urgent and more complex than I started. But I also think that we have to get together and do something about it. And one other general comment about the book, we all have people in our lives that have become misbelievers. That 5 years ago you would have said, you and I are the same, and after 5 years you said, I don't know how we ever believed in the same thing. So it's a book about those people, but it's also a book about the nature of our own beliefs. Mm-hmm. And when we start examining our own beliefs, how sure we should be, and so on, and how our beliefs are formed. And it's also a book, I think, about where society is going in terms of trust and the importance of that.
Mm-hmm. So. And now, what was your personal experience as the pandemic was unfolding, and as eminent and pioneering behavioral scientists, behavioral economists who had already spent a lot of time talking about how predictably irrational humans are, but also you were dealing with potential threats and risk yourself. So take us back to that moment and reflect on what your reactions were, especially as you were also exposed to what people were trying to evaluate, assess, infer.
Yeah. So in the pre-accusation day, when like before I saw my other image, I saw lots of mistakes. I saw lots of fear. I saw lots of mistakes. I saw how difficult it is to get people to accepting possibilities. I saw governments doing some things that were less than great. But my interpretation was that the decisions that were not made the way I would have liked them to have been made were either because of stupidity or difficulty or time pressure, or because of bureaucratic constraints. There were just things that you say, okay, we understand how to do it. There's some stupid thing in bureaucracy that is not allowing us to do so. Questions about privacy and so on. For example, I had a program that I developed that all indications were that it would be quite successful to figure out domestic violence for kids. But rules of privacy and some rules of social services prevented us from doing it. So that was kind of phase one. I see all of these things happening. I see the need for social science. I see what we could be doing. Some of it we manage, some of it we don't. For example, fines. Should the police and should governments create fines for people for misbehaving? You and I know that fines rarely work. They can work in the short term for something else. Could I convince governments to try and use rewards rather than fines? Because rewards can help in the long term, and it was clear that we're facing something long term. I had very little success. I managed on a few occasions to eliminate really big fines, but I didn't manage to convince many people to start doing reward instead of fines. Then the issue of being personally hated, that's very, very tough. You know, I can describe to you like death threats that I got, and I got them almost daily for 2 years. But the intensity of actually experiencing it is much, much larger. There's this concept called scarcity mindset, usually used for poverty, when people who are poor try to think about their finances. Will I be able to pay this bill? Will I do this? And then some of their cognitive capacity is preoccupied by that. Some of my cognitive capacity was very preoccupied by that. Like getting a death threat first thing in the morning, you know, it's not something. Even though I didn't believe they were going to actually come and kill me, it's such an amazing declaration of hate that somebody is even saying the world will be better without you, and I'm willing to risk life in prison for it's kind of an amazing thing. Kept on occupying me, and I felt very much this scarcity mindset. And then the third process of going into some of the darkest corners of the internet, it's a mix of sadness, a mix of amazement with how we work, what are the things that people can get convinced on, and how it's working. But then, you know, I'm kind of an optimistic guy, so my conclusion is it's a big problem and we need to start dealing with it soon. We can't wait.
So let's start with some, you know, definitions. How do we define, or how do you define misbelief to begin with?
Yeah, so for me, the definition is two-sided. There's the belief in something that is not true, or let's say against the grain. The experts don't believe it, most people don't believe it, so it could be anything, right? It could be that the earth is flat, it could be some things that there are actually good medications out there for cancer, but the FDA is not showing them. It could be all kinds of things. But then it's also something about the inside state. And the inside state means that people believe that in a very deep and personal way. So let's say that you and I believe that kale is just not that healthy as people think, right? It's not a big core for personality.
You're being very controversial now. I hope that nobody listening to us is upset by this, but yeah, good example.
I'm in California, just to be clear.
Exactly. Yes.
That's why it's okay. So let's say we think that kale is not as healthy, but it's not a core part of our identity. It's not the lens from which we view the rest of life. And the thing to understand about misbelief, the way I think about it, is that it's not about I'm having some wrong belief in the world. It's a central tendency, and it's a lens from which I view the rest of the world. And now this is a dangerous process. Why is it a dangerous process? Because all kinds of things happen. Some bad things are happening. And if my lens for interpreting the world is the lens of misbelief, I can see all kinds of things as evidence of whatever I thought in the beginning, and even worse, and that causes people to go down and down the funnel, what I call the funnel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so obviously accuracy is an important, baseline or anchor to judge whether something is misbelief or not. Is there sufficient attention, effort, and resources to actually educate people on the inaccuracy of beliefs, or have we just given up on accuracy and objectivity?
So there is an importance of the real state of the world, but I also want to say it's the state of the psychology that bothers me a lot, because as social scientists we are trained to hold multiple hypotheses, and the moment you have multiple hypotheses, some of them are going to be wrong, hopefully on some things. So it's not just about the state of the world and questioning it. It's about certainty, belief, and the lens of that. Now, do we have enough effort to educate people about the actual facts? The answer is no. And we're actually in a worse state than that, because it's not just that we don't have enough effort. We have lower importance of this. So let me just give a little bit of background. So in the book I describe a little bit my journey, but the majority of this book is this machine called the funnel of misbelief. It's based on stress and cognitive and personality and social. And together, all of these forces work together to attack our psychology, take advantage of us, and lead us to believe things that are not good for us, not good for our family, not good for society. And then, of course, I talk about trust. Now, when we think about education, there are these two components. Is the cognitive component, which of course is important, and we don't do enough of it. But there's also the social component. And the social component is a bit more devious, because if we look at the world right now, a lot of what we have are statements that are about identity and not about facts. Right? So let's say whether you're on the right or on the left, it doesn't matter. There are things that people say that are not factual, but are showing their connection to that identity.
So climate change, for example, people who either devote profound positive or negative attitudes towards climate change are using this to display their identity kind of features.
That's right. That's right. I think it's on every topic. It's on climate change. It's on gender. It's on, were the last elections stolen or not? It's on everything. People are basically expressing ideas that are very extreme, not because they initially believe those things, but because it communicates their loyalty to the team. Like if you just think about. I saw somewhere a piece of data that showed that the state in the US that had the lowest debates on COVID was Puerto Rico.
Right.
And they said that the reason is that they don't vote. But in every other state, COVID became a political issue. Now it should be not political. It should be, okay, let's evaluate cost benefit. Let's think about what do we know, what we don't know. We can debate. But why is Republican versus Democrat an issue on that? It's because everything is now becoming political. And
so the political machine had no incentive to weaponize COVID in Puerto Rico because it won't count.
That's right. There's no, it's not a political machine that matters. So it doesn't do it. So the moment you say this, you say, why is it? Why is it? And it's because statements are used often for expressing ideology and loyalty to the team. We call this shibolet. I describe in the book this notion about a war between tribes in Israel, where after the war they use the pronunciation of this word shibolet as which tribe are you in? If you say shibolet, you're one tribe. If you said sibolet, it's another tribe. And now we use the way you discuss it to not about the plant. It's a word that describes a plant. Nobody cares about the plant. They care about identity. In the same way, we're doing lots of things that are signaling identity. Now, it sounds like we're talking about the facts, but we're not. We're signaling identity, and that's a big part of the social element. In the social element, there's question of ostracism, of how we push people away and how difficult this is. There's then a force for people to join groups of people who agree with them, because who wants to be ostracized? We want to feel loved and supported. Then there's the issue of expressing more extreme ideas in order to establish your place in society. And then, of course, there's cognitive dissonance that says that once you've spent a lot of time and effort in a group, your opinions change together with this effort.
Yeah. So at the end of the book, you seem to confess somewhat uncomfortably that you are more of an optimist than a pessimist, and that at least you're trying to see, the potential that humans have to rectify these things. But the book also suggests very clearly that we are spiraling down, tribalism is getting us worse, and that despite the fact that some would argue, we have all these tools to become more informed, more knowledgeable, and more educated, actually we are becoming more prone to misbelief. Is there an argument to be made, Dan, that historically the polarization of the tribalism was around things like religion, Catholics, Protestants, politics, communists, capitalists, football, Manchester United, Liverpool, and that now actually it's expressed or augmented by these conspiracy theories or weird niches like, the one you became a victim of?
So I think a few things are happening. And you're absolutely right that I think there's more of it. It's not new in what it is, but it is new in the intensity, and it's new in the level of ideology, right? So think about, for example, what is the percentage of parents in the U.S. who are indifferent whether their kids would marry somebody from their political party or the other political party?
No idea. Yeah, tell me how big?
It's almost 50% now are against it.
Wow.
That's a survey, not my survey, but something I saw. Now, that number has risen a lot, and a lot of things are becoming more extreme and more identity. Now, you could say, oh, it was always there. Yes, it's probably always there. Manchester United, but it is becoming more extreme. Now in the book, I was hoping to have a section on solutions. I don't have a section on solution. I have these little sections called Hopefully Helpful. And there are a couple of important things. One of them is to provide resilience, social support so people don't feel stressed and are not pushed away, to reduce ostracism, to help people think more carefully. And if you think about the old dinner table, that you met another 10 people from your family and you were forced to be exposed to their ideas, that's dying a little bit. You have less of that. And now if my dinner table is my my Facebook group who is giving me social support for my opinion that I hold anyway, and that's not very helpful. And from this perspective, I think there's actually quite a lot of things that the workplace should think about. We have a tendency to avoid complex problems. We have a tendency of saying, we don't talk about politics here, or we don't talk about identity here. And I actually think that that's not very healthy. And I think it's not very healthy for the business, and it's not healthy for the people. Yes, there are ways to talk and there are ways not to talk. Yes, we shouldn't get people to feel ostracized, and even people who have strange beliefs. Like I call this the funnel, because people start in a vulnerable position and they can go the wrong way. And I say you want to find people early, because that's when you actually change them. But what's the equivalent of going to the pub and meeting people with multiple opinions? And what's the equivalent of the workplace is probably the only place that is we can still do it. But how do we do it? How do we do it in a way that doesn't ostracize people, that accepts them, that gets them to think more carefully about their beliefs, and actually prevent them from going down that path? So in a world in which resilience is lower, social connections are lower, I think the workplace have a bigger role. And just to think about this, what is the role of remote work in this? Now, of course, remote work was thrown on us. I don't think anybody would have chosen full remote work for 2 years straight. But what, looking back at this, and you say, okay, people did not have, like, all discussions on video conferencing are efficient. We start meeting on time, we end meeting on time. There's no chit chat. It's all very functional and all has this. But at the same time, people don't get diversity of opinions. They don't get to check their beliefs. They don't get anything outside of that constraint. And I think that contributed as well to the dissent of many people.
We spend less time assuming that we can be in a position to serendipitously encounter people who see the world in different ways and who are at the opposite political spectrum with us, which of course science shows is already a potential gateway to opening our beliefs. But should we spend less time trying to align other people's beliefs with ours and find common ground, or just find ways to coexisting, collaborating, and cohabiting with them, irrespective of how they see things? Because I think a lot of it, and you talk about overconfidence, narcissism, obviously righteousness as being the enemy of this. But on an individual level, what are the best solutions or the helpful, recommendations?
So, the funnel of misbelief, and that I think is a really important part, is stress. The breeding ground for creating of misbeliefs is stress. And I don't mean the stress of, gee, look how busy I am, I have such a book schedule. It's the stress of bad things are happening to me, and I don't understand why. Why is my health? Why am I getting fired? Why, all kinds of things like that. And that creates the need for a story. It creates the need for a villain, and it creates the story for like a conspiracy. So that's the starting point. And this is the first thing we should do, is we should say, how do we reduce this stress from people's lives?
Mm-hmm.
And the only antidote we know is resilience. And one of the interesting things is that stress accumulates across different domains. So you can have stress from your relationship and your kids and work and health, and it accumulates. It's not that, oh, you know, our brain separates stress from one thing from another. No, we have an overall stress. So whatever we can create as resilience is basically one of the best inoculations against that. And resilience means that you feel you have friends and you can count on people, and if something goes wrong, you have an address, and that's the first important thing. The second component, which is the cognitive component, is basically the fact that we get to choose what information we want to be exposed to. Do we listen to Fox News or NPR, right? We can choose which one. And the diversity of opinions is reduced. And again, something that, as we said, you know, meeting real people helps. So if I see a video about people getting an injection, putting a spoon on themselves, and the spoon is magnetized, and I get to ask somebody and say, oh, you know, here's my opinion about this. That's a healthy part. And another healthy part there is getting people to question their own beliefs. We call this the illusion of explanatory depth. And when you ask people, like, how much you understand how a flush toilet works, or a zipper, or a lock, or a virus, they say, oh, yes, I understand how it works. And then you don't tell them anything. You just say, so help me understand this. Give me more details. Give me the exact. All of a sudden, they realize they don't understand it as well. So we know that if somebody has opinion A, attacking them is not a good strategy. They don't listen, they counter argue. But saying, I'm not arguing with you, just help me explain your opinion. It's very, very helpful. So on the cognitive side, it's about being exposed to more information and about forcing people to think more deeply their beliefs. Personality, there's lots of curious, interesting things, as you said, narcissism, jumping to conclusion, creativity, and so on. But we can't change personality. So we just need to see who is more in a dangerous position than the other. And then on the social side, there's a lot of things we need to do, and that's where the culture of the company is incredibly important. You know, ostracism, rejecting people for their beliefs, is a really terrible thing. You know, we all know about psychological safety and how important psychological safety. A cancel culture, ostracism are against that, right? So when people state an unacceptable opinion, let's say about politics, things, how do we want to deal with that? You know, if they don't feel comfortable saying it, they'll never say it, and they'll never get additional information. They will also not feel supported. If people make fun of them, there's a symmetry that if I make fun of somebody, I think I'm making a little bit fun of them, but they perceive it as big fun or undermining. So how do we develop a culture that is a culture of psychological safety, where people feel comfortable expressing even strange opinions, with the understanding that we do need to help them? It's part of our job, is not to get people to go down the funnel of misbelief. So I think, and then you know, if you think about this whole package, this whole package is basically about people changing their opinions and then having this view of mistrust. And the moment people adopt this view of mistrust, it's terrible for everybody. Everything that they see is creating mistrust. And you know, here's just a thought, but you know, as people are trusting less, trusting the government less, start trusting the FDA less, trusting the FBI less, trusting that, what's happening to trust in the workplace? What's happening to trust there? And I think it's going down in the same way, because these lenses of mistrust are not limited to, oh, I'm just looking at mistrust in the FDA and that's it. No, the things that happen is that you start looking at all kinds of things, and you say, this is not just a mistake, this is an evil intention.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to worry about it as a society level, but I think the workplace also need to recognize that psychological safety, multiple of opinion, acceptance, all of those things are incredibly important.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me that at least the intentions are there to improve things, and at least the problems that we're dealing with, although there are complex problems, are becoming at least more like first world problems compared to the problems we had 50 or 100 years ago, right? Even when you hear people talk about microaggressions or, psychological safety, bringing your whole self to work, historically, these were not even remote aspirations or dreams. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, are we making progress on the whole?
So I don't think we're making progress. I think right now things are getting worse. I think polarization is going worse. I think the inability to discuss difficult topics, I think we are making things worse. And I think it's because these are big problems, and our reluctance to deal with them are making them worse. Mm-hmm. So that's one. The question, are these first world problems or not? Yes, they are. But if somebody asked us 10 years ago, what are the big problems that are threatening the future of humanity, I think that misbelief would not have been one of them. Mm-hmm. At least for me, I wouldn't have said that. Mm-hmm. If you ask me now, I would say this is a real issue. Like, think about something like elections. There are lots of people who believe that the last elections were stolen. What will happen in the next election? Are we starting from zero, or are we starting from where we left the last elections? I think we're starting from the place we started last election. What about trust in health? Or imagine something else. Imagine we had COVID-23. What is our capacity as a world to work together? What is our willingness to sacrifice things for the benefit of others? A lot society is based on, the trust is such an important lubricant for society. We trust the people who maintain the elevators. Mm-hmm. We trust the people who make food. We trust the people who raise our kids and babysit them. And like, the amount of trust that we have in society is incredible. What happens when we lose it? I don't know if you ever had your house stolen or anybody ever robbed you. These are shaking experiences. Because all of a sudden,
I grew up in Argentina, so this is likely to have happened to anybody you speak to.
That's right. These are things that hopefully people get over, but when they happen, it's a shaking thing. Your notion of personal security, your notion of trust is shaken to the core. And then, the odds that, something like this happened to me. I took a hitchhiker and something bad happened. After that, what was my tendency to take hitchhikers? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Not so much. We now that's a personal example, but I think those things are really important to understand it as a societal level. Mm-hmm. We have so much to gain from trusting each other. Organizations have so much to gain from people within them trusting each other. As mm-hmm. we start losing that, there's a real cost, but we just don't see it as much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'll post a link to the book. Congratulations again, great read, and I'm sure it will get a lot of people to think and reflect on how they view the world and others. Just final question. What are you doing in LA? I know that you're branching slightly out of, academic and book projects. So what brought you to LA? And talk a little bit to our audience about this project that you mentioned briefly.
Yeah, so COVID, as I said, had all kinds of less than pleasant things. So I tried to do a couple of new exciting things. So I wrote a kid's book on procrastination that somebody is illustrating now. But I also helped write a drama series for NBC. And it's a drama series called The Irrational. And NBC commissioned 10 episodes. We got to film 7 before the strike happened. But on Monday, the first episode would air. And it's a show about the life of a professor that also got burned in a different circumstance than I do. But if you see the show, you'll see his office looks like mine. He teaches social science and he helps the FBI. And every episode has one psychological element is the villain. So it's a very psychological show, shows a little bit of research, a little bit of how something about human nature. It was so much fun. It was so much fun to help write, to go to the filming, to see some of my sentences being said by the guy who's playing my character. So Monday we'll have a premiere. It will be very
fantastic. Congratulations. Did you consider acting it, or were you considered for the actual acting role?
No. I wasn't. They did give me. I appeared twice as a background artist. One time was cut, but the second one I'm hoping that
you make it.
I hold a sign protesting something.
Fantastic. So The Irrational, NBC, and I assume it will be also streamable on other platforms later on for people who are in other parts of the world.
It will be on Peacock, because that's NBC, yes. And I'm not sure about where else later.
Okay. Dan, thank you so much for making time. Congratulations again, and stay well.
Lovely to see you.